Now, very good. This is January 23, 2022. It is a Sunday, 3 p.m. Eastern Time. We are starting session 26 of Advent of Divine Justice. And we have here with us Mr. Ehsan Bayat, who has, through his resources he's developed through the Crimson Academy, he is presenting on this material today, as he has been for the past 25 or so sessions, which we welcome all of you to please review all the sessions that we've already done as we're going through this book, The Advent of Divine Justice, paragraph by paragraph. And there is so much more than just the text, where there are references, there are definitions to words that we may not know. We explore all that together. So, Mr. Ehsan, please, we are ready.
Let's first start off with our prayer, and then we'll get into our session for today. Thank you very much, dear John. Thank you.
And would we be able to have you actually say the opening prayer today?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you, dear John.
Thank you.
So this is a prayer revealed for the Bahá'ís of the Southern States. O my God, Thou seest me in my lowliness and weakness, occupied with the greatest undertaking, determined to raise thy word among the masses and to spread thy teachings among thy peoples. How can I succeed unless thou assist me with the breath of the Holy Spirit? Help me to triumph by the hosts of thy glorious kingdom and shower upon me thy confirmations, which alone can change a gnat into an eagle, a drop of water into rivers and seas, and an atom into lights and suns. O my Lord, assist me with thy triumphant and effective might, so that my tongue may utter thy praises and attributes among all people, and my soul overflow with the wine of thy love and knowledge. Thou art the omnipotent and the doer of whatsoever thou willest. Abdul Baha. Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much, dear John and Jeremiah. So we're going to get back into it. So last week, dear John and Jeremiah were covering paragraphs 51 through 58. And these are in very important and critical paragraphs that were dear John and Jeremiah were covering, was the Baha'i perspective on racism, really, on the approach to handle racial prejudice. Now we're going to be getting into our next paragraph set, and I will be sharing my screen so you can see where we are. Okay, here we go. So now we're getting into paragraphs 59 through 62. And if you say, Ehsan, where's paragraph 59 in my Advent of Divine Justice? Paragraph 59, it starts, okay, paragraph 59 starts, dearly beloved friends. It's on page 61 of this one, okay? And in this older edition, it starts on page 34. And the old subheading was called Their Double Crusade, because now we're getting into the beloved guardian is now talking about the double crusade, also called the twofold crusade. So the subtopics that we'll be addressing in this section is going to be this double crusade, this twofold crusade, as well as the regeneration of the community's inner life. And very interestingly, tribulations and tests. The beloved guardian mentions that the American Baha'i community will be facing tribulations and tests. And not on this, per se, the physical and scale that the friends in the cradle of the faith felt, but psychological tests and these type of other types of tests. So I have done quite a comprehensive, as I always do, search on tribulations and tests. So this is going to be a very interesting section, will be the Baha'i approach to tribulations and tests and sufferings. So this will be a very interesting section. Okay, so without any further ado, as I always say, let us jump into reading these paragraphs 59 through 62. Okay, and I will kick it off with reading paragraph 59, then we'll go to our other readers. Okay, here we go. Dearly beloved friends, a rectitude of conduct which, in all its manifestations, offers a striking contrast to the deceitfulness and corruption that characterize the political life of the nation and of the parties and factions that compose it, a holiness and chastity that are diametrically opposed to the moral laxity and licentiousness which defile the character of a not inconsiderable proportion of its citizens, an interracial fellowship completely purged from the curse of racial prejudice, which stigmatizes the vast majority of its people. These are the weapons which the American believers can and must wield in their double crusade, first to regenerate the inward life of their own community, and next to assail the long-standing evils that have entrenched themselves in the life of their nation. The perfection of such weapons, the wise and effective utilization of every one of them, more than the furtherance of any particular plan or the devising of any special scheme or the accumulation of any amount of material resources, can prepare them for the time when the hand of destiny will have directed them to assist in creating and in bringing into operation that world order which is now incubating within the worldwide administrative institutions of their faith. Dear Jeremiah, paragraph 60, if you could.
In the conduct of this twofold crusade, the valiant warriors struggling in the name and for the cause of Baha'u'llah must, of necessity, encounter stiff resistance and suffer many a setback. Their own instincts, no less than the fury of conservative forces, the opposition of vested interests, and the objections of a corrupt and pleasure-seeking generation must be reckoned with, resolutely resisted, and completely overcome. As their defensive measures for the impending struggle are organized and extended, storms of abuse and ridicule, and the campaigns of condemnation and misrepresentation may be unloosed against them. Their faith, they may soon find, has been assaulted, their motives misconstrued, their aims defamed, their aspirations derided, their institutions scorned, their influence belittled, their authority undermined, and their cause at times deserted by a few who will either be incapable of appreciating the nature of their ideals or unwilling to bear the brunt of the mounting criticisms which such a contest is sure to involve. Because of Abdul-Baha, the beloved master has prophesied, many a test will be visited upon you, troubles will befall you, and suffering afflict you.
Very well read. Thank you, Jeremiah. Many a test will be visited upon you. Troubles will befall you, and suffering afflict you. Moving to paragraph 61. Dear Scott, could you read this paragraph?
Let not, however, the invincible army of Baha'u'llah, who in the West and at one of its potential storm centers is to fight in his name and for his sake, one of its fiercest and most glorious battles, be afraid of any criticism that might be directed against it. Let it not be deterred by any condemnation with which the tongue of the slanderer may seek to debase its motives. Let it not recoil before the threatening advance of the forces of fanaticism, of orthodoxy, of corruption, and of prejudice that may be leagued against it. The voice of criticism is a voice that indirectly reinforces the proclamation of its cause. Unpopularity but serves to throw into greater relief the contrast between it and its adversaries, while ostracism is itself the magnetic power that must eventually win over to its camp the most voracious and inveterate among its foes. Already in the land where the greatest battles of the faith have been fought and its most rapacious enemies have lived, the march of events, the slow yet steady infiltration of its ideals, and the fulfillment of its prophecies have resulted not only in disarming and in transforming the character of some of its most redoubtable enemies, but also in securing their firm and unreserved allegiances to its founders. So complete a transformation, so startling a reversal of attitude can only be effected if that chosen vehicle, which is designed to carry the message of Baha'u'llah to the hungry, the restless, and unshepherded multitudes, is itself thoroughly cleansed from the defilements which it seeks to remove.
Excellently read. Thank you, Scott. And our last paragraph, let's us have Miss Rose, are you available to read this? Okay,
I think her sound.
maybe. Yes, dear John, if you could kindly read this one.
Sure. It is upon you, therefore, my blessed, beloved friends, that I wish to impress not only the urgency and imperative necessity of your holy task, but also the limitless possibilities which it possesses. But also the limitless possibilities which it possesses of raising to such an exalted level not only the life and activities of your own community, but the motives and standards that govern the relationships existing among the people to which you belong. Undismayed by the formidable nature of this task, you will, I am confident, meet as befits you the challenge of these times, so fraught with peril, so full of corruption, and yet so pregnant with the promise of a future so bright that no precious age in the annals of mankind can rival its glory.
Thank you, dear John. Thank you. So these are the paragraphs 59 through 62. Okay. Now, we're getting up to really, which is paragraph 65, which is a synoptic paragraph. But in this paragraph 59, the beloved guardian is now stating in this paragraph, why did he go to such a length talking about rectitude of conduct, chaste and holy life, and freedom from racial prejudices? And you can see here, a rectitude of conduct in all of its manifestations offers a striking contrast to the deceitfulness, the corruption that characterize the political life of the nation. Remember, the beloved guardian is creating this new race of men that Baha'u'llah is talking about. He's placing the standard here. So he's saying this rectitude of conduct is complete striking contrast to the standard of deceitfulness and corruption that characterize the political life of this nation. Then his second weapon, chaste and holy life. He says a holiness and chastity that are diametrically opposed. This is a word that the research department, when I presented this whole thing, they wanted me to bolden that and highlight it when I'm talking about the standard of what the beloved guardian was talking about. Diametrically opposed. Every word of this entire presentation is diametrically opposed to what's happening in this country. So this is diametrically opposed to the moral laxity and licentiousness which defile the character of not an inconsiderable proportion of its citizens. So if you do a 180 to anything they're doing, you're probably in the right. So that's really the reality, the beloved guardian saying. And then an interracial fellowship completely purged from the curse of racial prejudice, which stigmatizes the vast majority of its people. So we have to have this interracial fellowship. And it's not just like, hey, I have an African-American friend or I have an Asian friend. As a Baha'i, we have to go outside of our, thinking and go proactively and, have that type of love all encompassing and bring them into our heart and be like that. So it's that, be proactive about it. So it's an interracial fellowship, completely purged from the curse of racial prejudice. And then the beloved guardian is now talking about these weapons synoptically, because he's already talked about each one of them specifically. Now he's bringing them all together. And for what reason? This is very interesting. What does he say? These are the weapons: rectitude of conduct, chaste and holy life, and freedom from all racial prejudices are the weapons in which the American believers can and must wield in their double crusade. What is this double crusade the Guardian's talking about? Double crusade? Are we at war? Yes, technically we are. So what is this war? The first is to regenerate the inward life of their own community. Inward life. The first is the spiritual battle from within. We have to conquer ourselves, conquer our prejudices, conquer our egos, conquer ourself, the self. So that when we become a recreation, a better you, a better me, and so then we can go recreate our communities, have the highest quality devotionals, have the highest quality children's classes. So we are the best yous and me's, spiritual beings, having this rectitude of conduct, having this chaste and holy life, living the life as a Baha'i. No trace of prejudice in our thoughts and our minds, as one of the qualities of a chaste and holy life is clean-mindedness. Cannot have any thoughts of prejudice. We have to constantly clean this inner life. Then, first to regenerate the inward life of our community. So that's one of the battles, because we said it's a double crusade, right? 2. So what is the other one? Next is to assail the long-standing evils that have entrenched themselves in the life of their nation. So we first got to, take on the home game, and then we got to do the away game. We haven't done the home game yet. We got to take on ourselves. And then once we've conquered ourselves and taken on the challenges of our community life, then we can go and say, hey, we got a pretty strong team. And then we can go and take our team, as they say, to the away game. And the reality is, this away game, which is taking on the long-standing evils that have entrenched themselves in the life of their nation, that's going to be quite a challenge. Because the community needs to be a lighthouse. It needs to be a beacon, a bastion of hope for the whole world. Right now, it might be a flicker of light in certain areas. It needs to be a massive torch held by the community, strong, emblazoned by every Baha'i, unified by every one of them, not just by a few. Every Baha'i needs to hold the torch in their heart. That's why it says right here, very clearly, regenerate the inward life of the Baha'i community. So it means you have to be living the Baha'i life internally. That's what it really means. When we talked about honesty, that was inner truthfulness, right? No one's going to be doing all the checks and, checks on you, because how can you know? The only way you can know someone is honest if they're truthful by their speech. You don't know if someone's honest unless you see their words and their deeds. That's why Baha'u'llah says, let deeds be your adorning, right? Your action in this day and age is very important. How are you truly living a Baha'i life? That's very important. So that's why the inner life here is the transformation of the inner life. And then the beloved guardian talks about the perfection of such weapons. Perfection. I love this imagery because it makes me think of the old Middle Ages, and they're, sharpening the swords, and ready to go into the battle. And this is really what we're doing. We should be refining the swords, each one of them, sharpening our blades, because this is a spiritual battle. If you recall, there was a quote in the last part that was read, saying the evils of society rampant today is mostly a spiritual problem. And that's from the beloved guardian. The world is afflicted by a spiritual disease right now. So we have to have a spiritual weapon to take it on. And we talked about many of these spiritual problems, such as materialism. And one of the symptoms, if you remember that quote coming from Baha'i International Community in the last part, one of the symptoms of this problem is racism. This racial prejudice is a symptom of humanity not recognizing the oneness of humanity. Because they have not recognized the oneness of humanity, what they have done over the years is, I am better than you. I am better than you. And so because of their materialism, and then they've created classism, and then they've created racism to elevate themselves over one another. So they've invented racial prejudices to elevate themselves, to gain more wealth. So to counteract this problem in society, His Holiness Baha'u'llah, the beloved Abdul Baha, and also here the beloved guardian have all spoken about how to counteract this problem. And here the beloved guardian says, we have to perfect these weapons. Every Baha'i community has to work hard on this. Every individual has to work hard on this. Perfection of these weapons, individually. Work on your rectitude of conduct. Work on your chaste and holy life. Work hard on your freedom from racial prejudices. What are you doing as a community to combat racial prejudices? Are your gatherings inclusive of everybody? Are your feasts inclusive? Hearing everyone? Are your meetings so loving, so welcoming to everyone? Or are there kind of cliques that form every gathering? And that's, the Persians over here, or this is over here, or whatever. And, or every space is just, everyone is just dying to come and hear, and it's such a warm embrace of a gathering. And then if this is the reality, we have to work to make our community more unified, more loving, more welcoming. This is what the beloved guardians are talking about. Moving on. So this is the perfection of these weapons, so that eventually, see, it says next. So eventually, we'll be able to combat the long-standing evils of the greater society, long entrenched evils that have entrenched themselves in the life of their nation. Okay, so, and very interestingly, dear friends, when we were talking about these weapons, when the beloved guardian was first addressing these as the spiritual prerequisites for the success of all the teaching plans, if you recall that paragraph, when the beloved guardian was talking about the spiritual prerequisites for the success of all teaching plans, temple projects, and fun projects. Here, the beloved guardian re-emphasizes it again. He says, the perfection of such weapons, the wise and effective utilization of every single one of them, more than the furtherance of any particular plan. Because remember, it says the success of all teaching plans is dependent on these spiritual prerequisites. So it's more important that these be refined. Work on these. More important than any particular plan. More important than the 9-year plan that we're just launching. More important than the 1-year plan that or the 12-month plan, or all those 4 or 5-year plans, or the 10-year crusade, or any one of those plans that we've ever gone through. This is more important. Not that the 9-year plan is not important. God bless us, that's supremely important. It's just being launched. But this is even more important. And this is what it's saying. Or the devising of any special scheme, or the accumulation of any amount of material resources can prepare them in the time when the hand of destiny will have directed them to assisting in creating and in bringing into operation that world order, which is now incubating within the worldwide administrative institutions of their faith. Now, someone asked me, Ehsan, why is this more important than any plan? It's because these words are for the entire formative age. It's not just for, written 83 years ago by the beloved guardian for the launching of the first 7-year plan. These words are for the entire formative age, all the way up to the point when we reach the golden age. So, as they say, these words are per se timeless. We don't know when the golden age is going to appear. So that's why they have working on these spiritual prerequisites for success. These spiritual prerequisites, namely these weapons, refinement, perfection of these weapons, are more important in that sense, more important than the furtherance of any particular plan. That's what coming from the beloved guardian. Now, this is paragraph 60, okay? We're recapping. All of this is so important, and we just read this, and then we're going to go into all of this. Now, paragraph 60 says, the conduct of this twofold crusade, the valiant warriors. Do you consider yourself a valiant warrior? Well, you should, my dear friends. You should, because when you embark with the name of Baha'u'llah, first and foremost, you say, I am a valiant warrior, and then get into it. You should be holding aloft each one of these weapons and enter into the field of battle like a warrior. So this is what the beloved guardian says. You are a valiant warrior, struggling in the name and for the cause of Baha'u'llah. But what does he say? You are going to encounter stiff resistance and suffer many a setback. Oh my goodness. So you're going to experience challenges when we enter into into this crusade. Then the beloved guardian says, their own instincts, no less than the fury of conservative forces, the opposition of vested interests, the objection of a corrupt and pleasure-seeking generation must be reckoned with, resolutely resisted, and completely overcome. As their defensive measures for the impending struggle are organized and extended, storms of abuse and ridicule, campaigns of condemnation, misrepresentation may be unloosed against them. So this is what the beloved guardian says, what is coming? What is coming? It's going to be storms of condemnation, misrepresentation. People are going to say things about the faith. People are going to say, when you launch the name of Baha'u'llah, when you hold that banner and enter into the field, people will come and try to attack because you are on the attack. So they will counterattack the forces of darkness. So this is what the beloved guardian is saying. The forces of darkness will come hurling and attack, trying to assault. Their aims, they will try to defame. Their aspirations derided, their institutions scorned, their influence belittled, their authority undermined, and their cause at times deserted by a few. So people may even leave the faith. They may cower. They may shrink at all the attacks that are coming. But what is then at the very last paragraph line here, it says, because of Abdu'l-Baha, the beloved master has prophesied. This is very interesting. What does Abdu'l-Baha say? He says, many a test will be visited upon you. Many a test will be visited upon you. Troubles will befall you. Who's he talking to? He's talking to American Bahá'ís here. The American Bahá'ís. He says, many a test will be visited upon you, and troubles will befall you, and suffering afflict you. Very interesting. And we're going to study about all the trouble, the purpose of troubles, the purpose of tests, and the purpose of these, and the approach that Baha'is should have. It's very interesting. So then, what an awesome paragraph, paragraph 61. Then the beloved guardian says, let not, however, the invincible army of Baha'u'llah. Again, my dear friends, do you consider yourself invincible, an army of Baha'u'llah? Or do you consider yourself like a little passive soldier sitting on the sidelines and watching the army nicely move and trudge along? Or are you a general? Or are you in the spear of the army and moving at the fastest pace that you can? Or cavalry that you should galloping and moving into the battle? Invincible army of Baha'u'llah, who in the West, and one of its potential storm centers. This is a potential storm center where we are. In his name and for his sake is fiercest and most glorious battles. Be afraid of any criticism. We should not be afraid of any criticism or any condemnation which the tongue of the slanderer may seek to debase its motives. Then the beloved guardian says, let it not recoil before the threatening advance of the forces of fanatism, of orthodoxy, of corruption, and of prejudice that may be leagued against it. Recoil reminds me of a snake slithering, reverting back to its little hole. That is not what we should do. We should immediately, they come out, we come out 10 times stronger. That is, if they try to do something, we come stronger. This is the power of this invincible army of Baha'u'llah. The voice of criticism is a voice that indirectly reinforces the proclamation of its cause, unpopularity, but serves to throw into greater relief the contrast between it and its adversaries, while ostracism is itself the magnetic power that must eventually win over to its camp the most vociferous and inveterate among its foes. And lastly, this is the concluding part. It says, already in the land where the greatest battles of the faith have been fought and its most rapacious enemies have lived, the march of events, the slow yet steady infiltration of its ideals, and the fulfillment of its prophecies have resulted not only in disarming and in transforming the character of some of its most redoubtable enemies. They're talking about in the land of its birth, where the vociferous enemies, the rapacious enemies, rapacious means just bloodthirsty. They're like animals and savage, beastly enemies. They have been tearing and ripping the flesh of the Bahá'ís and then the Bábís for so many years. And this is what they're saying. The character transformation of these Bábís and Bahá'ís. What has that happened? These most redoubtable enemies have been affected by that transformation of these Bábís and Bahá'ís and disarmed them. It says not only in disarming, but also transforming the character of some of these redoubtable enemies, but also in securing the firm and unreserved allegiance to its founders. So complete a transformation, so startling a reversal of attitude can only be effected if that chosen vehicle, which is designed to carry the message of Baha'u'llah to the hungry, the restless, and unshepherded multitudes, is itself thoroughly cleansed. Now, dear friends, we have talked about being cleansed. This is, again, If you want Eson, if someone says Eson, what is one of the themes of Advent of Divine Justice? And I will say very simply, thoroughly cleansed. This is something that should be, as they say, highlighted, because that's really what it's about. Absolutely cleansed. Inner life, the private character, to be pure, to have that rectitude of conduct, thoroughly cleansed from the defilements which it seeks. Okay? To be able to be the absolute best you that you can be. This is about the new race of men. Paragraph 28, paragraph 48, paragraph 150, all talking and addressing this new race of men that we're being addressed in this Advent of Divine Justice. Okay. Then, paragraph 62. It is upon you. Now, the beloved guardian is now addressing again. He's saying it's upon you, the dear American Bahá'ís. Therefore, my best beloved friends, that I wish not only to impress the urgency and imperative necessity. So two things. This is something, if you read the writings of the beloved guardian, and the writings of the beloved guardian, I'm not just talking about, the compilation Bahá'í administration, not talking about Advent of Divine Justice or Promised Days Come or any of the writings of the beloved guardian. Two things that he always does. He stresses the importance of something, but he also stresses the urgency. Okay? Two things simultaneously. He says it's important, but it's urgent. Okay? And so he's stressing the importance as well as the urgency of this holy task. And what is this holy task? It is to take on these spiritual prerequisites for the success of all teaching plans, namely these weapons, rectitude of conduct, chaste and holy life, and freedom from racial prejudice. He says it is urgent as well as imperative to take on this holy task, but also the limitless possibilities which it possesses of raising to such an exalted level not only the life and activities of your own community. Now you're saying, Ehsan, yeah, we already got these community building things going on in my community. I can't do anything else. I'm just too busy, Ehsan. What are you talking about? I'm just, I'm strapped. How can I take on anything else? Well, here's the lowdown, as they say. This is really in your private character. This is for you to take on in your private internal life. Okay? Every single Baha'i, if you claim the name, as they say, you claim the name. You say, I am a Baha'i, means you are going to do the work. And the work is transformation of your inner life. And it's a day-by-day thing. It's a ruse-be-ruse. Every day you got to make yourself a better you. Work on it. How can I be a better me, right? And then that reflection of you will be a reflection in your community. And then slowly by your transformation, you'll affect the transformation of another heart. And likewise to another heart. And to another heart. And this is how the world changes. There's a very simple study. Was one person smiled in one part of the world, and that person smiled at a little kid, and that kid lit up, and that kid went around and started smiling at all her friends and just was smiling, because we know smiling is contagious. So that little kid smiled and laughed. And that little kid smiled and laughed. And there was a lot of grumpy little kids in that school. But what happened was that little kid smiled and laughed. But what happened is a good 3/4 of the kids smiled and laughed. Also the teachers laughed. What did it do? It actually raised the performance of the education in that school. Because of that one kid. You see what I'm saying? Very simple things. The world isn't very simple. We do what we're supposed to do. The world can actually undergo a change. Anyway, So all of this, all that dear John and Jeremiah and myself have been addressing is for the transformation of the inner life. And through this transformation will affect the transformation of the external conditions of our Baha'i community. And then the other stage of the double crusade, the transformation of the greater society. This is really an incredible task that the beloved guardian is setting out for the Baha'i community here. So he says, I am confident. The beloved guardian says, I am confident. Imagine that. I am confident that you will meet as befits you the challenge of these times, so fraught with peril, so full of corruption, and yet so pregnant with the promise of a future so bright that no previous age in the annals of mankind can rival its glory. So there we are, dear friends. That was a quick, as they say, rereading of it. Now let's get into a more intense study of these paragraphs. Checking our time, we're doing well. The beloved guardian identifies rectitude of conduct, a chaste and holy life, and freedom from racial prejudice as his three weapons, okay? That the American Baha'i community must possess in their twofold crusade. First, to regenerate the inner life of their own community, and next to fight the evils, the long-standing evils that have been entrenched and engraved into the life of the American society. It reminds me of have you ever visited the Grand Canyon? What an impressive historical landmark we have in the United States is the Grand Canyon. But it's just a small river that's been running for eons through this area. And it reminds me of these long-standing evils that have just been carving and gutting the landscape. This is what is happening. Long-standing evils that have entrenched themselves into the American society. In conducting the twofold crusade, the American Baha'i community would experience tests and tribulations. In this section, we're going to explore the concept of this inner life of an individual and the community, together with the nature of tests that the American Baha'i community have to face. So this is going to be a really cool section. We're going to really go into tests also in this section. Okay. Now, dear John, if you could read this slide, we're going to get into our major key points from paragraphs 59 through 62. Okay?
Sure. The twofold crusade of the American Baha'i community consists of first regenerating the inner life of their own community, and then fighting the evils that have been embedded in the life of American society. A community, like an individual, has a life that represents the dynamics and activities associated with it. The inner life of a community constitutes the collective beliefs and the values of the community.
Keep going, dear John. You're doing great.
In general, the collective transformation of a community depends to a great extent on the spiritual transformation of the individual. The deepening of the inner life of an individual is mentioned as being a direct consequence of recognition of the manifestation of God and the resulting process of spiritual transformation.
Excellent. So I think that was, we got a few more. Okay, I'll read this one. Thank you, dear John. The tests that an American Baha'i community would experience are both intellectual and mental. So the beloved guardian is saying we're not going to be experiencing the physical tests like the friends in the cradle of the faith, but we're going to be experiencing intellectual and psychological, mental type of tests. Mental tests are different from physical, where an individual may be threatened, imprisoned, tortured, or even killed to recant his or her faith. A mental test differs from the physical test in that its main aim is to undermine the faith of the believer and cause doubt in his heart. All right, so let's get into it. Everyone ready? Here we go. Okay. In paragraph 59, dear friends, the beloved guardian refers to the three weapons: the rectitude of conduct, a chaste and holy life, and freedom from racial prejudices, as the three weapons that the American Bahá'ís must use in their double crusade. Firstly, to regenerate the inner life of their own community, and next, to fight the evils that have taken root in American society, these long-standing entrenched evils. The perfection of these weapons and the wise utilization of them will prepare the community more than any other plan or material resource to help initiate the world order of Baha'u'llah when the right time has arrived. And if you recall from an earlier session, and we were studying the world order of Baha'u'llah, all the different stages of the unfoldment of the world order of Baha'u'llah, when here the beloved guardian is saying, more than any other plan, this will bring about the coming of the world order of Baha'u'llah. More than any other plan is these three weapons. And so here's a depiction of the armor of God. And this is coming from the Old Testament in Ephesians, chapter 6, verse 10, chapter 10, verses 18. The helmet of salvation, the shield of faith, the breastplate of righteousness, and the belt of truth, the sword of the Spirit, and the feet prepared with the gospel of peace. So when we go out into the world, are we equipping ourselves like we're going into, per se, into when the beloved guardian says, let me scroll back, when he said, valiant warriors. Do you see yourself as one of these valiant warriors, equipping yourselves to go into a spiritual combat in that sense? Here in the Bible, he says that we should literally, mentally equip and spiritually equip ourselves, like we are going into a spiritual warfare. So the sword of the Spirit, the belt of truth, the shield of faith, the helmet of salvation. This is another cool picture, and I like this one. It says, when we take off the armor of God, we sink, and when we wear the armor of God, we stay afloat. I thought that was kind of cool, because we got to stay firm in the covenant. And we got to stay strong and keep that armor of God on us. And here it was like, if you take the skin of the orange, I think this is a clementine or a satsuma or one of these type of cutie fruities. If you take that peel off, it sinks. But if you keep it on, it floats. It's an interesting experiment. And that's but in this, very simple. It says, we got to keep the armor of God on. Meaning, we got to stay alert. We got to protect our heart from what is happening in the world and be alert. And also keep it refined. You can't just say like, oh, I got the armor of God on, but I haven't been polishing it. I haven't been, looking after it. Because if you are not vigilant, what happens to armor if you don't look after it? It rusts. Right? You got to keep it polished. So you got to, stay strong. You got to be firm in the faith. You got to be deepened. You got to, be active. And so these are all aspects of polishing, refining your weapons. And so these are things that are necessary. So these are all qualities essential in these requisites, spiritual prerequisites for the success of all teaching plans. It says, interracial fellowship, completely purged from the curse of racial prejudice, which stigmatizes the vast majority of its people. These are the weapons in which the American believers can and must wield in their double crusade. First, to regenerate the inward life of their community. and then to assail the long-standing evils that have entrenched themselves in the life of their nation. So we're here to take on these long-standing and long-entrenched evils. And so here, this is another wonderful slide. These are the weapons which the American believers can and must wield in their double crusade. Rectitude of conduct. Right? Rectitude of conduct. Chaste and holy life. Interracial fellowship. And so this is just re-emphasizing these over and over, because this section is, I want every single one of these friends, this is a synoptic section. Now here the beloved guardian is saying, why did I talk at such great length about rectitude of conduct? Why did I talk about such great length chaste and holy life? And why did I talk at such a great length about freedom from all racial prejudices? And now he's really hitting it home. He's saying it's about the inner life and transformation of the Baha'i community, as well as taking on the long-standing evils entrenched in the greater society, the double crusade. This was a very cool quote. And if you guys have the feast message, the Feast of Kalimat message, dated July 11th, 2020, I encourage you to go back to it because it was a very interesting message. This is the National Spiritual Assembly's feast message of Kalimat, dated July 11th, 2020. And the National Spiritual Assembly wrote this in their message. And they were stating, what is the purpose of devotions? So I put this in the presentation because it's very interesting. This is from the National Spiritual Assembly. It says, we encourage you to think of devotional gatherings as occasions in which, drawing upon powers inherent in the Word of God, we gather with people of different backgrounds with the aim of eliminating racism from our society. So it's not just, hey, I'm getting together with some friends and I'm going to say some prayers and read some readings and then, count it. I got a devotional on the books, the aim of the devotional is, drawing upon the powers inherent in the Word of God, okay? But it's also the aim is the elimination of racism from our society. So it's not like, oh, I'm only going to invite certain people. Oh, this is a Persian devotional. Or this is no, devotional cannot be of only one people. We're inviting everyone. A devotional by definition is drawing. We gather with people of all different backgrounds. So devotional by definition should be inclusive of everyone. National Spiritual Assembly is saying we are gathering with people of different backgrounds with the aim of eliminating racism from our society. So then we should have devotionals on the subject of unity, subject of love, subject of bringing hearts together and warmness and fellowship. These could be themes of our devotionals because we're working on the elimination of racism. And then this is a very true and poignant point here. If you feel like talking about racism is too stressful, imagine what it's like to live with it. And I don't know how many of you, dear friends, have been in race discourses and individuals that have every day that deal with racism. It's extremely stressful. And this is one of the major underlying reasons that dear African Americans and Native Americans' lifespans are shorter than other groups is because of the overwhelming stress load that racism has and is doing. And there's also many underlying other areas, such as the inadequacy and inaccessibility to adequate healthcare, inadequate access to healthy food areas. They live in food deserts, and their housing developments are often poor and things like this. So there's so many other reasons and other underlying reasons that that racism for generations has affected populations. And so we should discourse and not hesitate to discourse as Baha'is. We should be knowledgeable. We should research. We should study. We should learn and not hesitate to discourse. Yeah, we'll make mistakes. We'll say sometimes things that are not right or whatever, but we should not hesitate. And if we make a mistake, we should immediately apologize. We should have an attitude of absolute love, and we should have an attitude of, not shying away from uncomfortable subjects. But we should also have an attitude of humility and understanding, and knowing that populations such as African Americans, such as Native Americans, such as have suffered, have truly suffered for generations, and we should be able to talk to them with understanding, love, and really warmth, genuine warmth. It is important. This is a wonderful social worker, Shauna Beasley. What does she say? She says it's important to acknowledge and discuss race-related incidents when they occur. Not, 10 years ago, there was a thing, was called this or that, and, now we're addressing it. We feel it pertinent and timely. No, we should discuss it when they happen and discuss these race-related incidents when they occur, to be able to talk about it. It is not easy, but we need to flex those muscles. Please, dear Scott, you have a hand. Go ahead, dear Scott. You have a hand, please.
I'm sorry, I didn't. I'm on my cell phone now.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm having problems technically. It's very important for white audiences to be able to say that they've made a mistake, and that they don't. They may not want to say that they feel uncomfortable. This is something that happens. If we don't know much about society, different parts of the world or different societies or things that we think we haven't spent enough time learning about, we may be embarrassed that we don't know about this. And to say, I'm sorry, I made a mistake, and not blame it on drugs we're taking, or that I was tired, or something that we've seen in society, but a heartfelt honor, and then say, how can I respond, and how can I go back and make right that mistake that I made? And that may be needed to be done in a private setting, so that we can learn from these mistakes that we make. But that's something that when I talk with other white individuals, that's the most, when you get really down to it, it's that I don't want to make a mistake. I don't want to be, but there's fear in that. I don't want to be made a fool of. I don't want to show my ignorance. Those are fears. So thank you for bringing this up.
Excellent. Thank you, dear Scott. And as my little green friend from Star Wars, also called Yoda, he says, fear leads to the dark side, And so we should not hide behind our fears. We should be valiant. We should be courageous. And how can we be courageous? It's by pouring our mind into our heart with love. We should love each other so much that we care to learn about each other. We should care to learn about the sufferings of each other, or the histories of each other. For example, if I have a dear African-American brother or sister, I should care enough to learn his or her history about what has happened. So if I ever want to talk to them and have that deep connection, which the Universal House of Justice in their letter says we should have veritable friendships. What does that mean? Veritable friendships means true. We should be able to connect at the molecular level with each other, at the cosmic and spiritual hearts connected. How can that happen? We should know each other intimately. We should know our histories, our peoples, where we've come from, what has happened to each other. So when the Universal House, the National Spiritual Assembly wrote that great and pivotal document, Call to Action, to go out and directly embrace African Americans and Native Americans. How can we do that if we're not really connecting them and learning their histories, understanding them, or just going to and saying, hey, would you like to learn about the Baha'i faith? What is it? Where is that connection? You have to connect with them, love them, truly, genuinely love them, but also try to study their histories, learn more, deepen yourself, work on your own prejudices. So when you see them, you see God in them and love within their hearts. And this is something that this is a process that as it's all an internal process. It's not just, that's why it's called flex those muscles. Which muscles are we talking about? The heart muscle. It's the heart muscle. It reminds me of the Grinch. The Grinch, for his heart muscle was small initially, right? And then the spirit of Christmas made his heart grow 3 sizes. Dear friends, are you flexing your heart muscles to everyone in your community? Loving everyone? Genuinely embracing everyone? Warmly welcoming? And it's not just like, oh, everyone's welcome at feast or whatever, or this gathering. But do you know about them? So genuinely, intimately know about the histories, so you can be able to talk well with someone and have that level of to be able to address them or whatever. That's something we, as a Baha'i, we should be knowledgeable to be able to connect at the heart level with everyone. At the heart level. And that's something that we should work on every day. This is that interracial fellowship that we should be establishing to regenerate the inward life of the community. Regenerate means bring back, because it's floundering. If it's regenerated, it means there's lacking the life. It's to regenerate it, to bring it back. And then next to assail these long-standing evils. We got to first work on our home game. Now, this is a very important slide. I included it. And dear friends, this is my own personal graphic on the right. So I made this one. So this based upon my insights in reading the Advent of Divine Justice. The life of a community is influenced by the dynamics of the relationships of the individuals. This is what a community is. It's influenced by the dynamics of the relationships of individuals within it and the activities associated with it. If you ask me, Ehsan, what activities are going on in your community? I would say, yeah, we have fireside, we have a study class, and we have a devotional, we have this. And so then you could get an idea of the dynamics of what is happening in a community life, right? The relationships. The social cohesion of a community is determined by a willingness of the members to set and strive for common goals. Willingness to strive for common goals. Example, the House of Justice sets out a plan, a vision for the whole Baha'i community. The vision, the plan, the blueprint. The willingness of the entire community to set and strive for those goals. And we saw how the American Baha'i community embraced the goals that were set by the beloved guardian. It was sudden and immediate. And that is the response that we need to have. Sudden and immediate. The inner life of the community constitutes the collective belief and values of the community. Regenerating the inner life of a community requires the development of high ideals and values, such as the three standards defined by the beloved guardian Shoghi Effendi: the rectitude of conduct, the chaste and holy life, and the freedom from racial prejudice. Now, I put these as cogs, these type of cogs that rotate. You cannot have a working machinery if you only are working on one of these. I'm working every day on my freedom from racial prejudice. I'm going to this or that. I'm going to this race unity event. I'm talking at this race seminar, and I'm talking on. I have so many African American friends and everything. And I'm really working hard. But if you're not working on your rectitude of conduct and your chaste and holy life, you're not working on the totality of what the beloved guardian says, the spiritual prerequisites for the success of all teaching plan. This is what every single Baha'i needs to be working on. And this is what is your inner life, the transformation of your inner life. And this is a subject, dear friends, that every one of us has to go back to. What are the qualities that we have to work on as for rectitude? What are the qualities as a Baha'i that we have to work on for chaste and holy life? And what, as a Baha'i, whether I'm white or African American, or what are the qualities that need to work on to eliminate any form of prejudice in my heart? And what am I doing proactively to embrace and bring about a very well inclusive type of community? So this is what I should be doing internally to bring about a collective transformation in the community. The collective transformation of a community depends to a great extent on the spiritual transformation of the individuals. So if you say, Ehsan, our individuals in our community every day are just, they're working on themselves, they're praying, they're doing everything they can to do, and we have these incredible events and gatherings, and things are just moving by leaps and bounds. And I could say, hey, there's something different about this community. Something is moving. And then we could say, okay, there's something about unity of action that's probably happening there. That community is probably got unity of action, and they are probably having a degree of collective transformation. The Universal House of Justice explicitly states that the fate of the entire community, this is such a powerful statement from the Supreme Body, says the fate of the entire community depends upon the individual believers. It depends on you. It depends on me, the individual believers. Without the wholehearted support of each and every one of the friends, every measure adopted, no matter how well thought out, is foredoomed to failure. You got to do what you got to do. I mean, when the house says do it, you got to jump. You got to, when the call is raised, you got to go. And that's the reality. No matter how well thought out, if you ain't going to go, doesn't matter whatever the Supreme Body says. If you ain't going to do it, it's pointless, meaningless. In another message, the Supreme Body states the role of the individual is of unique importance in the work of the cause. It is the individual who manifests the vitality of the faith. Vitality, vita, mean life. So we are the life of the faith upon which the success of the teaching work and the development of the community depend. If we don't do the work, the vitality is dead. There's no life. And I found this quote to be so apt. It says, true and lasting solution to correct ills can be found only by inner collective transformation of human beings. Inner collective transformation of human beings. And that's why this is really what the whole Advent of Divine Justice is about. Inner transformation of the human beings, which will bring about a collective transformation of all society. The three spiritual prerequisites of rectitude of conduct, the chaste and holy life, and freedom from racial prejudices, while enhancing the patterns of behavior of the individual, result in the collective transformation of a community. In other words, the deepening of the inner life of an individual within a community results in a regeneration of the inner life of the whole community. Here's an example. Just a very simple example, and this goes personal, as they say. In 2019, I was sitting at home, and I was like, COVID had hit, and I was like, okay, what am I going to do? I was like, okay, I've been doing the Crimson Academy for years. I was like, okay, maybe I'll develop a course on the advent of divine justice. And no one has done a comprehensive study of the advent of divine justice that I've ever seen. So I was like, okay, let me attack it, as they say, So I had read the Advent of Divine Justice before, and it's not the easiest of reads. And you're seeing it right here. It's not the easiest of reads. So I read the cover to cover. Then I was like, okay, I'm going to map it out. So I mapped it out. Now, as you see, there's now 24 parts, and we're on part 16. So mapped it out. Then I started making slides and pulling pictures and videos and content. And this whole presentation took me 1 year, roughly 8 hours a day, roughly every day for a whole year. And then once I was through, I was like, yeah, I got a very solid understanding of the Advent. And I was like, okay, maybe I'll just put some videos of me presenting it, and I'll put it online. And I did that. I did that for the first 12 parts, and I put them on YouTube. And then I was like, wouldn't it be more effective if I actually held classes on this? And I'd never done classes. I've done a lot of the classes at different places, Bosch and other places, but I've never done classes on Zoom before. This was the first time. So I was like, okay, let me try that. This is during pandemic, and the world was a different world, right? So I was like, okay, maybe I'll do a class on Zoom on the Advent of Divine Justice. And I asked a few Baha'i friends, should I do it? Is this a good idea? And they said, yeah, go for it. Let's try it. So I did it. I sent an email out, and lo and behold, a whole bunch of people were like, yeah, I want to do it. And I was totally blown away. And I was like, really? And so we started our first class on the Advent of Divine Justice. That class finished about 5 or 6 months ago, and it ran for almost 2 years. And we finished the whole of Advent of Divine Justice. And almost 90% of those students during those 2 years stayed in the class. And it was an incredible experience, truly incredible. But also what happened during that period, other classes emerged around the country, in England, in you name it, and this was all, and then even this one has emerged here in Clearwater. So what I'm saying is, a singular event of one person studying and working on his own transformation and intense study has powerful effects on the transformation of many. And that I'm not trying to, as they say, self-glorify. I was just trying to give an example of you don't know how far-reaching your effects are, what you are doing on the transformation of your own community. And that's why we should work on ourselves. And through your work, try to, as they say, lovingly, gently, rub off on people, as they say, and work to create an impact in your community, and then through that impact will create an impact in the greater society. And you need to be proactive about these things. It's not just like passive. And this is just a very simple diagram that I also created here. These three spiritual prerequisites of conduct, chaste and holy life, freedom from racial prejudices, are enhancing the patterns of the individual, result in collective transformation of the community. So the more that you work on these, it will have greater effect on enhancement of community life. More than any plan, here the beloved guardian said, more than any plan, furtherance of any plan. So this is something, dear friends, that if you work on these, you will be doing more good than any other thing. This inner transformation. And this is one of the most powerful quotes from His Holiness Baha'u'llah, and one of my most favorite quotes. And when I was a young chap, now I'm an older chap. When I was a young chap, I set to memory this one from Baha'u'llah, from Kitab Iran. And it says, this is in the Baha'i writings, the deepening of the inner life of the individual is mentioned as the direct consequence of the recognition of the manifestation of God. You have to recognize it. His Holiness Baha'u'llah identifies the primary purpose of every revelation. This is such an incredible quote. What he says in the Kitab Iran, page 240, he says, and yet is not the object of every revelation to effect a transformation in the whole character of mankind. A transformation that shall manifest itself both outwardly and inwardly, that shall affect both its inner life and external conditions. For if the character of mankind be not changed, the futility of God's universal manifestations would be apparent. Very simply, saying the purpose of why His Holiness Jesus Christ, His Holiness Muhammad, His Holiness Buddha, the Blessed Bab, His Holiness Baha'u'llah, why every single one of them, the object of every revelation, this is what he's saying, the object of every revelation has been to effect a transformation in the whole character of mankind, a change. This is why they've come. They have come to effect a transformation in the whole character of mankind. But what kind of transformation? A transformation that shall manifest itself both outwardly and inwardly. It means a real change at the very core, that you are truly a new race of men. This is why they have come. That's why they have given their lives. That's why Baha'u'llah was 40 years of imprisonment in the worst prisons. This is why they have come, for a true transformation, inner transformation, and affecting its external transformation, external conditions. But then the second line, so pivotal, so monumentally powerful. For if the character of mankind be not changed, if I'm not changed, if my friend is not changed, if I, say, hey, I'm a Baha'i, but I don't do anything. I don't care, whatever. I'm just like a passive Baha'i or whatever. If the character of mankind does not change, what happens? What is that saying? Baha'u'llah says, Kitab Iran, the futility of God's universal manifestations would be apparent. Means all that Baha'u'llah has done, all that is only Jesus Christ, the purpose of why they have come has been futile. Futile. They have come for the transformation of your heart. But if you don't care, if you say, I don't care, it's not important, I'm going to stay as I am, what you are saying is their efforts is futile. It's like a teacher saying, please study, please read, please care, please do this, please do that. But the student says, I don't really care. I'll still get my F. It doesn't matter. You're just telling the teacher that everything that he has tried to do to help you, to care for you, is futile. And this is, again, re-emphasis, is not the object of every revelation to effect this transformation in the whole character of mankind. A transformation that shall manifest itself both outwardly and inwardly. Are we working on this transformation every day? This is another awesome quote. I'm going to get Scott to read this one. Go for it, Scott.
I have to get back to this. Okay. Ultimately, the power to transform the world is affected by love. You are channels for this divine love. Let it flow through you to all who cross your path.
Beautiful. Simple, yet profound. So we're talking about transformation here, transformation of our inner life and external conditions. And here, ultimately, the power to transform the world is how much you love. How much do you love? Are you burning with love for yourself? Really? We should love ourselves so much that the best thing for ourselves is the faith. The best thing for us is the word of God. The best thing. How much are we immersed in it? How much are we immersed in it? How much do we care? Or are we, as in the last, the last class where dear John and Jeremiah were talking, and they were talking about that the world has become so steeped in materialism and have shifted away from spirituality. Are we so caught up in the hustle and bustle of the world today that we're allocating less and less time for anything spiritual? I mean, I love when I see children. And they're just playing with each other. And they don't have no concept of, this person is of this color or this person is of that color. They have no concept even. They're just, he's my friend. Or I want to make a friend with this person. And they rush into a playground and they're just trying to make a friend with them. And that's how they are when they go to a playground. I mean, now I have a 5-year-old, but when my little kids were 3 and 4 and 5, they go to a playground and they just immediately want to find a friend. And it doesn't matter who it is. They just look around. And if they see someone, they immediately just want to go make a friend. Why has life made us so many degrees of barrier between us? Why can't we just have that degree of, I want to be a friend. I want to love you. I want to care about you. I want, the absolute best for everyone on this planet. And I just want to have that sense of veritable friendship with you on the highest and most meaningful sense of when I talk. And that's love. And love is when you talk to someone and you want to know everything about that person. Right? I bet you when many of you are married or whatever, right? And some of you have been married a long time, but I'm talking about in the early stages. Because when you get married a long time, you feel like, oh, I know everything about that person. And, that's ancient history. But in the early stages, often, we want to know everything about that person. It's true. And because the heart is burning with love. And that is the kind of love that we need to have for everyone that crosses our path. Especially our dear brothers and sisters, our African American brothers and sisters. We should have that kind of love to overcome the racial prejudices in this country. We should have that kind of love. We should want to. We should proactively want to and care to know about the sufferings, the plights, and the histories of their people, and to be able to connect with them at a much deeper level. Just a few months ago was the Tulsa massacre. We should be able to connect with them. And just last weekend was the Martin Luther King celebration holiday. And do we know the events that happened and transpired during this entire period? To be able to connect with one of them. We should be more knowledgeable than any other group more knowledgeable than any other group. Because the beloved guardian says this should be freedom from racial prejudices should be the watchword of every single Baha'i, whether young or old, whether black or white. Freedom from racial prejudices should be the watchword of every single Baha'i. And if it's the watchword, by God, we should be able to speak knowledgeably, convincingly, and authoritatively on all aspects, history, and whatever on these subjects. Not just, a PhD or scholar, any Baha'i. But not just speaking like a professor, but with love. Dear friends, our communities should be so enmeshed in love. That's the reality. The knowledge should be pouring here, but it should translate into a burning sense of love in here, that it tenderizes the heart, the knowledge. It tenderizes the heart. The suffering of them should make your heart melt and make you fall in love with them ever more and feel for them. That's how I feel. When I was living in Scotland and I heard about the atrocities of the Germans during the Holocaust in period 1938 through 45, my heart burned for the Jewish peoples. I was so appalled and so hurt by what the Germans did. And it affected me so greatly that when I learned about what the Germans did to the Jewish peoples, and not just the Jewish peoples, the Slavs, the Gypsies, the Baha'is, there were so many groups of people that they massacred. The knowledge should make us ever more connecting with other peoples. Love should permeate us. That's who we should be. So that's the transformation of love. And that's all I wanted to share on that. The secret. Yes, dear Scott, please, you have a hand.
I just, along that, a lot of this stuff takes time. And for some reason, we think that we don't have enough time to do all these things. But when, as you said, I thought that was an interesting, you mentioned that when we do love someone, whether it's a very close friend or a potential spouse or people at work, we will spend many hours with these individuals talking about all parts of their life. And we show interest in them when we do take that time. And we can do that with people that are different from us. And it doesn't necessarily have to be people of color, maybe a different economic status, maybe another part of the country. But yes, I think that we're talking about racial aspects, and people don't want to take the time. I don't have the time. But when they feel it's really important, they will take the time. And so, when we don't, if we happen to be interested in car mechanics or fishing or I don't know, something else, we will take all these times. We'll get magazines about it. We'll take time reading books about it. And we'll seek out people in our society that will tell us more about auto mechanics or fishing or something else, and or cooking, whatever. And we have to be, I hope that the people who are interested in trying to work on our racial prejudices, that we can go to the library, we can buy books, we can borrow books about these issues and do this on our own time. And it would help us, and we wouldn't feel as afraid. I'm talking about whites as particularly, but we wouldn't be as afraid and not have knowledge about things. So I just wanted to add that. I'm sorry.
It's very good. Thank you, dear Scott. Thank you. Yeah, very good point. I mean, the more you care about something, the more you will invest in it. I mean, I remember I was with one of the National Spiritual Assembly members of the United States, and it was at one of these regional conferences, and he was sitting beside me. And he said very simply, and this is in regards to the fund, it really is in relation to whatever. He says, the more you care about something, you can just look at what you're investing in. Where are you putting your money? What are you investing in? And you can see very simply what you care about. And that was in regards, at that conference, was in regards to the fund. But in the same way, what are you investing your time? Your greatest commodity that you have is your time. We all have a limited sense of this commodity in this world. What are you investing your time in? Go for it, Scott. You have a hand, please.
Well, I just was saying that if I'm not, there's a quote from Abdul Baha that I think is where there is love, nothing is too much trouble, and there is always time. And if I'm not mistaken, Justin Baldoni, the actor, has this tattooed on his arm.
Sure,
that's that important to him. And so, if we do have that love, nothing is too much trouble, and there's always time. We do that. We just have to prioritize things and make things that we've learned in the advent of divine justice a higher priority than it was. That's what I've done the last 5 or 6 months with you. So I appreciate it.
No, it's beautiful, dear Scott. It's about prioritization. It's exactly what you said. If you love something, you will shift, you will make the time for it to happen. By God, you will move mountains. You will make things happen. We always say, I don't have time for this. I served a little more than a year at Bosch Bahá'í School in my 20s and in the Bosch Bahá'í library, there was a quote, I think it was on the wall at one time. And the quote said, if you read 10 pages a day from the writings of Baha'u'llah, the Blessed Bab, and Abdul Baha, just 10 pages a day. It's not like a ridiculous amount of reading, just 10 pages a day from the writings of either from Baha'u'llah, the Bab, and Abdul Baha. You will have read everything in English from Baha'u'llah, the Bab, and Abdul Baha. I'm not talking about the beloved guardian, that's it. But from the central figures, you will have read everything there is in English. So, dear friends, that's another thing. How much are you immersing yourself in the writings? Working on, if you love something, how much are you diving into it? If you are saying, I believe in the oneness of humanity, I believe in it. Remember, this is not the age of belief. This is the age of test. It's one thing to believe, but this is the age of advent of divine justice. He's putting you to the test now. He's going to test you. Do you believe it? Oneness of humanity? So what are you doing for the oneness of humanity? Actively, internally, and in your community to bring about this double crusade that the beloved guardian is talking about. What are you doing? That's the question. What are you doing? And the first thing is, what am I doing actively? Every day, this is the question should be brought up. What am I doing? And then the next day, you should have evaluate yourself. What am I doing to take it to the next level? Remember that wonderful quote that I shared it very early on when the beloved guardian wrote the National Spiritual Assembly of the Bahá'ís of the United States and Canada. He says, increase your teaching and efforts 1,000-fold. Right? What are you doing? And how can you take it to the next level? This is what we should be doing. The secret to change is to focus all of your energy, not on fighting the old, but building on the new. We are the light. We don't turn our head toward the darkness and fight the darkness. We're light givers. We're lighthouses. We have to bring more light to the world. We got work to do. So our heads should not be turned towards the darkness. Our focus should be on the light and bring more light to the world. Scott, I don't know if it's an old hand or current hand, please.
Read this, you say?
No. I didn't know if you had your hand up. I didn't know.
Oh, no, that's an old one. I'm sorry. I didn't.
Okay.
I've got
Excellent.
all this. Yeah. I'll
Okay.
take it down.
And then this is another quote from Socrates. He says, "Let him who would move the world first move himself." Let him who would move the world first move himself. If you want to move the world, you want to be the change in the world, as Mahatma Gandhi, be the change in the world. If you want to do that, you got to move yourself first. This is from the writings of Lord Buddha. He says, if you truly want to change your life, you first must be willing to change your mind. The inner transformation, remember, this is all about inner and external conditions, the inner life and transformations that we're talking about in these paragraphs 59 through 62. The entire purpose of the first half of the Advent to Divine Justice about the transformation of the inner life of the individual, rectitude of conduct, chaste and holy life, freedom from racial prejudices. If you truly want to change your life, you got to be willing to change this to effect the change here. You got to give up your own biases and your prejudices and your ways of doing things. This is an awesome quote from Gary Zukav. What he says, changing the world begins at the very personal process of changing yourself. The only place you can begin is where you are, and the only time you can begin is always now. It's never too late to change. I met a wonderful 98-year-old lady. 98-year-old, God bless her. She only lived one more month after I met this lady. She said, I've lived my whole life hating, absolutely hating African Americans. Yeah.
Wow.
She said, I hated them so much, my whole life. And I was on a teaching project. I was in North Carolina. She said, I lived my whole life hating them. I'd been taught to hate them, and this is everything I've learned. And then she said, after reading this pamphlet that I'd given her, this is when I was a teaching project in 2001 or so. I went out to North Carolina. I introduced her to the faith, and it was a small pamphlet, and it was about the oneness of humanity. We're all flowers of one garden. Very simple. The language was very easy. This lady was like 90. I said 95 or so. She was like 95 or around there. She was very elderly, and she said, I've hated African Americans my whole life, and I've seen them as less than human. And for the first time, I saw them in a different light, that they are just like me. And she said, it was such an eye-opener that she was scared. And she cried the whole day. And I was with her during that day. It was very emotional because her whole life, she had treated African Americans so poorly. And she cried, and I said, what you can do is start working to make friendships.
Yep.
And genuine friendships. So she never, declared. She was But in her heart, she immediately recognized the authentic principle and genuine principle from this faith. And she immediately started contacting African Americans in her community. And she told her story.
But
And she wanted to create genuine friendships. And in that little town of hers, she was the first person to establish one of these inter-race, dialogues. And she sat there, and she was she was a former clans lady or whatever, and she was proud. In her house had clan stuff. She was and you would have never known of that till she opened her mouth and talked about it. But the transformation in her heart was so amazing. To see her hugging African Americans, to see her crying and apologizing, to see her honoring African Americans. This was coming through the word of God, that it touched here. And this is, even as I said, she was 95. She lived less than a month after that. So the time can begin is always now. Doesn't matter. Please, dear Scott. Go for it. You have a hand, please.
There you go. I'm sorry. Shirley, I saw a story recently that Shirley Chisholm was a lady who had run for president. I think she's the first Black woman to be elected to the Congress, maybe. Mm-hmm. And she had there was the Alabama governor George Wallace was pretty much of a racist. He'd gone and he had done a lot of anti-racial speeches. He wrote on not reconciliation or anything, and those of us that lived in those times remember him well with it. And he was shot one time and was paralyzed, and as I'm not mistaken, Shirley Chisholm had gone to visit him in the hospital and wished him well, just went to visit him, stopped her I think running for president, if I'm not mistaken. And it kind of changed him. Toward the end of his life, if I'm not mistaken, George Wallace went to many Black churches and pretty much asked for forgiveness. Sure. And it changed. People can change at that time, and it takes a lot of guts to do that. And you have to have an epiphany, just like your friend. She had a realization, and people might say, "Well, she thought she was going to die. She better do something."
Yeah.
Well, but there's a lot of people don't do that, and there were two people that were on either side of Jesus being crucified, and one decided to, admit that he made a mistake, and another person didn't. So we just don't know. Unfortunately, people do spend a lot of their time in hate and fear, and so I'm thank you for sharing that story. That's a wonderful story.
Thank you, dear Scott.
Yeah.
So this is some Sophocles. It says, success is dependent on effort. Success is dependent on effort. How much are you putting in? Whether it's love in your community, whether it's the investment of your efforts to, delve into these pearls, which is our faith. How much are you putting in? How much are you investing? Success is dependent on effort. People can cry much easier than they can change. This is from James Baldwin. He says, people can cry much easier than they can change. We can wail and say, oh, the world is so bad. The world is so terrible. But we Baha'is, we have the solution. What are we doing to transform our inner life and external conditions to bring about this transformation that the world needs? In fact, there's a wonderful quote, it's actually coming up in the presentation, that actually the weight of the world's problems are partially dependent on how, as we Baha'is, are doing it. What are we doing? We shouldn't be crying out for and lamenting at the crises of the world. We should be actively working to bring about the transformation of the world. And this is, as always, I sometimes include from my Calvin and Hobbes. This is one of my favorites. It says, change is invigorating. If you don't accept new challenges, you become complacent and lazy. Your life atrophies. Change is invigorating. We shouldn't be scared to change. We shouldn't be scared to change. If you don't accept new challenges, you become complacent and lazy, and your life atrophies. In fact, almost all of the problems of stagnation of growth in corporations, in communities, in Baha'i communities, in anywhere, the stagnation of growth is because of fear of change. Very simple. You're scared to change. You've been doing it this way forever, and then you're like, oh, I'm scared to change. I'll just keep it. If it ain't broken, why fix it attitude? But it's actually broken. But you don't see it because you're blinded, because you're scared to change. And that, my dear friends, is why we're absolutely blessed in this day to have the supreme body, the Universal House of Justice, this infallible institution, to be watching out and constantly giving us these changes. Because if it was left up to us, we would be blinded and not having that foresight to change when change is needed. So the Universal House of Justice writes us with love and says, okay, dear friends, the time has come for a new change, a change of action. Now we're going to implement this. So Baha'i community, start the process of change. But we begrudgingly, slowly, flumsily, if not really a word, flumsily, but is a mixture of fumbling and clumsily waffle along instead of immediate and jumping at it. And the reality is, because often we have become so entrenched and scared of change. And the reality is, the Universal House of Justice has this vision, and they are seeing at the global level what is happening. And we also have to adapt and change when the time is needed. And as Calvin and Hobbes says, change is invigorating, brings life, vigor. If you do not change, become complacent and lazy. Life atrophies. If you don't change, what happens to your muscles? They atrophy, you become weak. Change is good. Moving on. This is from the Beloved Guardian. This is a very powerful quote. This is quoted to the Spiritual Assembly of Atlanta. And I actually think in the last presentation was also read. Love for each other, that deep sense that we are a new organism, the dawn breakers of a new world order, must constantly animate our Baha'i lives. And we must pray to be protected from this contamination of a society which is so diseased with prejudice. We have to truly and genuinely love each other. The more that we are known to be lovers of each other, the more that we can say, I'm getting closer to that name of Baha'i. Getting closer. But we have to be so known to be the lovers of everyone. In every sphere of our life, whether it's our work, whether it's our private life or wherever, the more that we're genuinely inclusive of everyone and lovers of everyone, then we can get closer and closer to being said, hey, that person is a Baha'i. Now, this is a very cool quote that I came across, and I'm going to let dear John, read this one. I came across this one, so I wanted to include it in the presentation. Go for it.
Thank you. I want to read this off. Being rude is easy. It does not take any effort and is a sign of weakness and insecurity. Kindness shows great self-discipline and strong self-esteem. Being kind is not always easy when dealing with rude people. Kindness is a sign of a person who has done a lot of personal work and has come to a great self-understanding and wisdom. Choose to be kind over being right, and you'll be right every time, because kindness is a sign of strength. Love is the answer.
Thank you, dear John. Thank you. So that's really what it's about. It's very simple. It's about working on ourselves. Kindness is not easy. Being rude is easy. Kindness takes effort, and that's what it is. All of this is effort. Everything is effort. How much are you investing to flex those spiritual muscles? Okay, so we're getting closer to, we're almost finishing. We just want to finish the few slides on the inner life of the individual, and then we'll get it. For next week, we're going to go into tests and tribulations, the last part that also be faced by the American Baha'i community. We're just finishing. There's a few more slides on the inner life of the individual, and we'll close it there for today. Regarding the significance of an enhanced inner life, the beloved guardian attests that if people only realized it, the inner life of the spirit is that which counts. But they are so blinded by desires and so misled that they have brought upon themselves all the suffering we see at present in the world. The beloved guardian then highlights that the duty of the Bahá'ís is to lead people back to a knowledge of their true selves and the purpose for which they were created, and thus to their greatest happiness and highest good. Is to lead people back to why they were created and to their highest good. So you can very simply see why Ruhi Book 1 is Ruhi Book 1, talking about the soul, talking about afterlife. Is because this is the common link that links all of us, leading everyone to why were we created, right? And bringing everyone back to the knowledge of their true selves. Who are we? What is our purpose? And thus to their greatest and happiest and highest good. So these are just a few of quotes, because this is a subject just like love. Inner transformation is also a subject that is written about enormously. And seers and great teachers throughout all the writings. And so these are just a few of some of the, in my opinion, some of the great writings on this subject of inner transformation. And this is from Robin S. Sharma. It says, it wasn't until I began to work on my inner life and know myself that my life changed. Success really does begin within. The size and quality of your outer life is only limited by the size and quality of your inner life. And this is from Meryl Beck. She says, personal growth work can be both exciting and scary. That's so interesting. It could be scary too, and may include the process of discovering disowned parts of the self, making peace with yourself, and becoming the best you that you can be. It is a journey to wholeness. And I think that 95-year-old lady that I talked about, it was scary for her because she confronted that racial prejudice that was within her. So that's where this confronting the you are. Who are you? And delving into your inner life. And this is from David Romanelli. He says, a vibrant inner life is more powerful than a busy outer one. Do you have a vibrant inner life? I know we're always talking about creating vibrant communities of action, creating these vibrant communities. But do we have vibrant inner lives? Are we vibrating with the pulsation of the faith of Baha'u'llah? When we talk about devotionals, are we only talking about devotionals where we're bringing our greater society? Or are we literally a devotional ourselves, where we're breathing in the word of God in our daily action, in our private lives, in every morning and eve, reciting the verses, reciting our obligatory prayers, and every day is literally where our work is performed in a spirit of service. Are we living embodiments of the faith in that sense, through our lives? Do we have a vibrant inner life? This is something that we should work on. Knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom. This is from Aristotle. And in the Lohe Hekmat, the tablet of all wisdom, it says that know thyself, from Baha'u'llah, know thyself. The man who has no inner life is a slave to his surroundings. This is such a powerful quote. A man who has no inner life is a slave to his surroundings. Means he's just a materialist. The inner life is the spiritual condition. If you don't have a spiritual life, you're just a materialist. Just whatever is going on in the world, that's what it is. Develop your spiritual muscles, your spirit, flex them every day, work on them. Develop your true self. This is from Rumi. World power means nothing. Only the unsayable, jeweled inner life matters. Only the unsayable, jeweled inner life matters. World power means nothing. I love that quote from Baha'u'llah. He says, these kings and these rulers and they all return to the same coffins as a pauper. The pauper and the kings and rulers, they all return to the same coffin. What does it matter of these riches and world power, the pomp and pageantry of these rulers? We all return to the same coffins. Doesn't matter. The great kingdoms and civilizations, whatever, that doesn't, meaningless. And again from Rumi, are you as you live deeper in the heart, the mirror gets clearer and cleaner. As you live deeper in the heart, live deeper in the heart. The mirror gets clearer and cleaner. Whenever your inner life is beautiful, your outer life will flower. And through love and sincerity, continuously beautify your inner life in every way by daily looking into the mirror of introspection. And this is from Attar. And you may have read the Conference of Birds. It's an incredible, incredible work from Attar, which I encourage you to read. And also there's a wonderful animation. It's on YouTube. On the Conference of Birds. It's His Holiness Baha'u'llah references it in his writings. He says, no one can bear his beauty face to face. And for this reason of his perfect grace, he makes a mirror in our hearts, looking there to see him search your hearts with anxious care. And we see in the writings of the hidden words, thy heart is my home. Thy heart is my home. Sanctify it for my descent. Thy spirit is my place of revelation. Cleanse it for my manifestation. So thy heart is my home. Cleanse it for my manifestation. Cleanse it. Right? Same words coming from Attar. Means We means clean your hearts. He makes a mirror in your hearts. Look there, see him in Baha'u'llah, see him. He makes his place, his seat in your heart. Search your hearts with anxious care. And this one, it says, the true character of a man is not defined by what he does in front of a crowd, but instead by what he does when no one else is around. The true character of a man is not defined by what he does in front of a crowd, but instead by what he does when no one else is around. True man is in his private character, his inner life and private character. That's what, my dear friends, Advent to Divine Justice is about. Is about refinement of our inner life and private character, creating that true Baha'i, and the new race of men. All right. I think there's just a few more slides on the inner life of the individual, but I think we're a few minutes over time. So I'm going to stop there, and then for next week, we're going to really dive into tests, trials, and tribulations. And that will be a very exciting discussion about all the different ramifications of tests, trials, tribulations, and sufferings. What do they mean? And how, as a Baha'i, should we approach tests? So that is for next week, as they say. So don't miss that session. It's going to be very exciting. But as for this session today, we explored the double crusade, the importance of these spiritual prerequisites, and how important these are for the transformation of our inner life, and that we should be working on these every day and try to bring about actively a vibrant inner life in ourselves, as well as work to bring about a vibrant community life. Very good. Any questions before we close it down and have our closing prayer? John, I hand it off to you or Jeremiah.
So I'm trying to think of who to say the closing prayer. And I think it'd be a good idea that we have dear Jeremiah say the closing prayer.
Excellent. Thank you very much, John. Thank you.
And by the way, I want to ask a question, if you may, before we do the closing prayer. The session for next week, session 27, can you please elaborate on the paragraphs we'll be reading?
Yes. Okay. So we'll be continuing this from the session today. So let me see. It was paragraphs. Let me pull it up in my book. Yeah, it was paragraph 59 through 62. So we'll be continuing from our session from today, but we're going to be expounding in great detail over the tests, trials, and tribulations that as the Baha'i community that we'll be undergoing, and really exploring all the different writings that the beloved guardian talks about tests, trials, and tribulations. So that 59 through 62 again.
Beautiful. And dear Jeremiah, if you're ready to say the prayer, we would appreciate you to say the closing prayer for today. Thank you, Jeremiah.
Oh my God, thou seest me in my lowliness and weakness, occupied with the greatest undertaking, determined to raise thy word among the masses and to spread thy teachings among thy peoples. How can I succeed unless thou assist me with the breath of the Holy Spirit? Help me to triumph by the hosts of thy glorious kingdom, and shower upon me thy confirmations, which alone can change a gnat into an eagle, a drop of water into rivers and seas, and an atom into lights and suns. O my Lord, assist me with the triumphant and effective might so that my tongue may utter thy praises and attributes among all people, and my soul overflow with the wine of thy love and knowledge. Thou art the omnipotent and the doer of whatsoever thou willest.
Thank you very much, dear John. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremiah, and thank you, dear Ehsan. Now, next week, everyone, at 3 p.m., we will be starting session 27. Please read those paragraphs, and we look forward